Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our Okta webinar today. That's all around improving your Office 365 experience and integrating Office 365 with Azure AD. So we're joined here by James Reeder from Okta, who will be presenting the webinar with you. Okay, so I'm now going to pass you over to Toby, who's briefly going to discuss the relationship between Bytes and Okta.
Thanks, Amy. So just a brief intro before James takes over for the webinar. Thanks everyone for taking the time out of your mornings. Just to help you with a bit of an understanding as to why Bytes partner with Okta. To us, it was a very natural partnership. Bytes, as I'm sure you know, do a lot around Office 365 and a lot around Azure. So to us, to partner with a vendor and a product that makes that end user experience seamless and very easy to adopt just made a lot of business sense to us. So without further ado, I'll pass over to James to take you through the presentation today.
Cheers, thanks Toby. So I'm just going to throw up my screen here, and that should now be on view to everyone. As Amy and Toby have mentioned, today we're going to be talking about how we can use Okta to improve your Office 365 experience. So in terms of today's agenda, we're going to skip past the intros because we've already done those. We're then going to give you a quick overview of Okta at a high level to sort of demonstrate what the platform is capable of in terms of the wider reach of the platform. We're then going to be going into today's specific topic, which is how we can improve your Office 365 experience. So that will start off with talking a little about the problem using native tools. We'll then move on how Okta can make that better. So the solution, as we're going to call it today. We'll then run you through a demo on how easy and how quick it is to integrate Office 365 with Okta. And then we'll have a short Q&A session at the end for any questions. So I'm just going to skip past the intro here. And we're going to start off with what is Okta. So Okta is an identity and access management platform with the sole objective to create seamless connections between people and technology. So connecting people to technology. Oh, let's not change the slide here. So Okta, unlike most of the competition in the identity space, has been born and built in the cloud right from the start to bring the power of the cloud to identity. Okta also only does identity and has no bias in what products an organization use. So we're all about connecting people to technology, giving you the choice to use the products that make most sense to your business, both today and also tomorrow. In terms of connections, we have the largest library of pre-made integrations, and this is growing at an unprecedented rate within the industry. So currently, including our beta integrations, we just have shy of 6,000 integrations out of the box. From a security perspective, Okta also leads the way here as well. And for those that are interested or need help going to sleep, we have a very large security overview white paper we can share as a follow-up of this call to go through all the security credentials, badges, certificates, etc., and the overview of the Okta architecture and how it's designed to be secure from the ground up. And finally, and most importantly to us at Okta is designed to always be on and never go down. Because identity forms such a core part of any business, it's important for us Okta to make sure it's always available so people can access your business critical applications and services. So, the Okta platform. So the Okta platform consists of the four main modules you can see up here on screen, and we also have down here developer SDKs. So everything that we can achieve in our standard user interface, we can also do programmatically through our RESTful API and other toolkits and widgets that we have available in our library. So starting off with Universal Directory. So Universal Directory is the foundation of the Okta platform, and as the name suggests, it's a directory-based service. And this is because the reason for being the foundation is because you need users to do stuff too. So Universal Directory provides that user repository, and for people that are using completely SaaS-based platforms, they can use Universal Directory as a standalone service. However, we're aware, and based on today's topic of conversation, integrating Office 365, most people are still using Active Directory or some sort of LDAP derivative on-premise. So with Universal Directory, we can integrate either omni or bidirectionally with other directory services in a matter of minutes. And what that means is users can use their existing user accounts and you can use their existing identities across all the platforms that you're connecting to Okta. And as the box, this facilitates such things as self-service password resets, self-service account unlocks, etc. But essentially, by bringing users into Universal Directory, you can then take advantage of the free modules up here at top. So starting off with single sign-on. Single sign-on, most people should be familiar with this concept. It's all about improving the end user experience. It's about giving them a single user account or identity to access all the services, applications, and platforms that they use as part of their business function. And through our AD integration with Universal Directory, that can also be their Active Directory account that facilitates single sign-on across all your services. Moving on, we have lifecycle management, and lifecycle management is one of the key benefits of the Okta platform, and that's because it facilitates automation to all your different business applications. So what that means is rather than having to create a user in Active Directory and then manually create the user in Office 365, Salesforce, G Suite, etc., lifecycle management automates that provisioning, updating and deprovisioning process throughout all your connected applications. So it means you only have to create that user once, and Okta will do all that hard work for you. And not only does this save time by automating the process, it also makes things more secure, because the biggest vulnerability in all organizations is the human factor. So by removing the human weakness in sort of the assigning permissions and access to applications, you're inadvertently making your environment more secure by following best practice of minimum level access. And last but not least, over here, we have our adaptive multi-factor authentication module. So this module does two things. So firstly, it gives you additional factors to use against the Okta platform, such as our own soft token app, Okta Verify, and also the other usual suspects, such as SMS, phone call, and so forth. And these can also be used outside of the Okta platform using our API and Radius integrations. But the more interesting part of this module from my perspective is where the word adaptive comes from. A policy engine to bring rich access controls to your business. So one of the common problems with SaaS is also one of its biggest benefits, and that's that SaaS applications out of the box have universal access. Wherever you are, you can access them. So with our adaptive MFA module, using our policy engine, you can control who can access your applications, when they can access the applications, and under what conditions. So what that means is you can really lock down your applications. And we can do this on an allow but prompt for multi-factor authentication. Perhaps the users outside of your office locations and you still want them to have the ability to access your applications, rather than just allow them to log in as normal, you can actually prompt them for a second factor to ensure a high level of authentication in certain circumstances. And with these rules as well, you could even completely deny access to certain applications. Perhaps you have a SaaS-based HR platform such as Workday or Bamboo HR. With the adaptive MFA module, you could block access to everybody outside of your office locations in a couple of clicks. So that's the Okta platform as a whole. And now we're going to have a look at the traditional problem of integrating Office 365 with on-premise Active Directory. Now, most organizations synchronize AD with Office 365. Most organizations synchronize AD with Office 365 to give their users the best possible experience on Office 365. However, to synchronize Active Directory to Office 365 and use single sign-on, your AD must be connected to Azure Active Directory. Now, Microsoft itself does indeed provide free tools to accomplish this. But each tool requires the burden of having to deploy, configure, and manage server resources, which can lead to serious costs, either internally or third-party consultancy services. In addition, in more complex environments such as multiple domains, Microsoft's own stack struggle to cope or even become unsuitable for customers. And here's just diagram for a traditional integration using ADFS and Azure Active Directory sync to connect your on-premise AD and your on-premise apps to Azure Active Directory. And as a quick example, this is a diagram of a typical ADFS infrastructure. And this is everything that's just needed to provide single sign-on. And this doesn't even include a separate server to run AD Connect to actually provision the users in the first place. Here at Okta, we find it important to highlight that even though Microsoft stacks may be free on the service, you soon discover all the hidden costs when you factor in things such as hardware, patches, upgrades, certificates, renewing those certificates, integrations, the management of all this infrastructure, the initial configuration, and then it becomes hugely more expensive than it looks like on the service, and it doesn't even give the best possible user experience. And this is where Okta comes in, and this is where we're going to talk about how Okta can provide a better solution for you. So Okta works in a slightly different way. Rather than the whole complicated on-premise infrastructure, because we're a cloud platform, we do all that heavy lifting and that complicated stuff for you. All that we require is a lightweight on-premise agent to integrate your Active Directory to Okta, which then Okta integrates to Office 365. This particular agent is about 4 meg in size. All it needs to connect to the outside world is port 443 outbound, so no heavy firewall changes required or anything like that. And all it needs to be placed on is any Windows machine that has read access to a domain controller and a service account to carry out that read access. This single agent handles all communication in complete real time, unlike Azure Active Directory sync, which is on a scheduled task. And this agent, like I say, completely real time between Okta, your on-premise Active Directory, and Azure Active Directory, which is the back end to Office 365. It supports delegated authentication, provisioning, deprovisioning, directory sync, and also facilitates things like AD self-service and password management and account unlocks. And when Okta is configured for delegated authentication to Active Directory, we don't actually store any AD credentials in the cloud, so passwords never get out of sync. All your passwords are stored locally, and we authenticate directly against your domain controllers. We believe that Okta's cloud platform simplifies and accelerates Active Directory and Office 365 integration and makes it possible to deploy Office 365 up to 6 times faster, while drastically removing all the hidden costs typically found in ADFS. In addition to this, Okta easily scales to cope with even the most complex environment, providing unprecedented flexibility. And just as an example, some of Okta's customers here and how fast they actually deployed Office 365. With one of our big use cases, which is Ongi, which they actually deployed Office 365 with over 100 AD domains in under 2 months. And this was to over 250,000 users, I think the end result was. Compared to this, for Ongi, Microsoft actually said they couldn't, in their existing environment, connect all these individual domains back up to a single Office 365 instance, and they were quoting the months and months of work to actually consolidate their AD domains into a flat AD structure to actually facilitate integrating Office 365. With Okta, we could use their existing environment and do it in just a fraction of the time and cost as well. Now, to actually show you how easy it is to integrate Active Directory and Okta to Office 365, I'm actually going to run you through a short demo and how quick this process actually is. End this slideshow here. I'm going to take you to an Okta admin portal. So this is the Okta admin portal that we're going to use to go through today's demo. So the first step in the process is to actually integrate Active Directory. So to do this, I'm going to go to Directory and Directory Integrations. In here, I'm going to choose that I want to add an Active Directory instance. And here it's just giving me a little bit of an overview of the architecture. So I'm going to set up Active Directory. Now, I'm just going to download this agent. And it's going to give me a few details on how to go about this process. So to actually install the agent, I'm going to move over to this window here. And I'm going to log on to my domain controller. Now, in Blue Peter fashion, I've already copied the agent over in advance, but you just need to get the agent over to the server as you'd probably expect to run it. So I'm just going to run for this agent. I'm going to click Next. I'm just going to install it in the default path. it's already enumerated my domain, which is okta-demo.ga. I'm going to specify an existing service account, which I've already created, called Okta Service. I'm just going to put in the password here to this AD service account. So this is what allows it to connect to your domain controllers to read all the information to provision those users up into Okta and then back out to Office 365, and also to do the things such as delegated authentication. So I'm just going to click next here. Oh, I think I put the password in wrong here. Oops, why is that not working? I'm just going to quickly change the account here. This is the problem with doing demos on the fly. Let's just put this in. So I'm just going to go for that process again. Oh, why is it not liking that? Let's just go for this process here. So here it's given the option to use a proxy server, but my particular domain, it can just talk straight port 43 outbound to the outside world. I'm just going to click next. And now it's just going to ask for my Okta tenant information so it can connect back to Okta. So I'm running it on a preview instance of Okta, and then it's just going to ask for my domain name inside Okta. So if I go back to here, I can see that my Okta domain name is okta-demo-domain.uk. So I go back to my server. I'm just going to place this in here and click next. So here it's now asking me to register with my Okta on Microsoft.com domain name. Now I'm just going to type in the password to authenticate back to Okta. So here, once I've authenticated, it's going to ask me to create an API token. So this agent can now communicate back to Okta. So I'm just going to click Allow Access. Wait for the install to finish. So now I've installed this, and that means I can now at Okta talk back to my Active Directory instance. But we've got a couple more steps yet to finish. So I'm going to go back to Okta, and it can see that my Active Directory agent has started. And now it's just going to ask me, where do I want to sync users and groups from inside my Active Directory? So for users, I'm just going to select my users OU. And for groups, I've got another OU for groups. It's then saying, what do I want my users to log on to Okta with in terms of their username format? And I'm just going to switch this to email address down here, just to make things simple for my end users. And click next. So my Active Directory agent is configured. And now it's just going to ask me, what attributes do I want to bring in from Active Directory? So here, it has all the base schema, so the minimum required schema, which is basically first name, last name, email address, and user principal and some account name. But I can also bring in any other attributes that I want to, even custom attributes from environment. So there's one particular attribute I want, and I'm going to search for DN, and this is actually already brought in by default here. So now I'm just going to click next. And I've actually now configured our Active Directory integration to Okta. So here it's taking me back to our Active Directory integration, and I can see this agent is live and healthy. I can see we already have delegated authentication enabled, which means that no passwords are stored in Okta, and they authenticate directly against the AD agent. And down here, I can also choose and change what our user in scope further down the line. Now, the only thing I've not configured is actually how it imports users from Okta, so from AD. So to import users from AD, we support 3 different ways. You can do a manual import, so you come in and click a button. We can do a scheduled import, or we can do a just-in-time provisioning. So just-in-time provisioning gives the feel of real-time synchronization without the bandwidth overhead. So what that means is when a user tries to log on to Okta, if they don't already exist inside Okta, it will in real time go and query Active Directory and import that user immediately into Okta so that user can instantly log into the platform without having to wait for a manual or scheduled import. And this also can be used for updating people as well. So when users actually log in Okta or trigger a particular action, that will in real time synchronize and update their profile from any changes made in Active Directory recently. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to enable just-in-time provisioning. I'm also going to enable to cover in between just-in-time provisioning a scheduled import. I'm going to run this every hour. Down here, it's also confirming what I want my Okta username format to be as before. It's going to ask me, do I want to send activation emails? Now, I don't want everyone to be spammed with activation emails initially, so I'm just going to click this here. I also want to bring in universal security groups, so I'm just going to tick this here. And then down below, the last thing we need to configure here is our match settings. So when a user is imported from Okta, so from AD, it doesn't automatically bring them into Okta. We just need to choose what the rules are for actually bringing that account from AD inside Okta. So if a user is a new user, down here at the bottom, I want to auto-confirm and auto-activate this user. Down here, it's talking about matched users. So matched user is when a user is imported from Active Directory and they already match an existing Okta user. What do I want to do with them? So for now, I'm not going to auto-confirm exact or partial matches. I want to manually confirm any accounts that may match here. So I'm just going to leave those unticked. And up above here, this is just where we define what counts as an exact match and a partial match. So currently by default, we have an exact match as the Okta username format matches, which is their email address, which should be unique to everyone. And a partial match is just based on first and last name. So that's all done here. I'm just going to go down and click Save Settings. So now we've configured how we're synchronizing to Active Directory completely. And to start off with, I'm just going to do a manual import from AD. So I'm going to go to Import, Import Now, and a full import, which is going to bring all my users and all my groups in from Active Directory. So this will just take a few seconds. So here I can see that 12 new users were imported and 7 new groups were imported as well. So if I go back to directory, now actually, while we're down here, it seems I've actually made a mistake in my demo environment. I can actually see this user, Antidote, as you can see in very original with names, actually can't be imported as there's a sort of an issue with the user's email here. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to go back. I'm just going to go to find my user. I'm just going to correct that email and get rid of the comma and just put a dot there instead. So now, if I just do an incremental import, that should now fix that user that has an issue there. So that user has now been brought in. So if I now go to directory and people, I can see all these users that I brought in from Active Directory. And if I click on a particular user, let's go for Hugo here. I can see this account has been mastered by Active Directory. I can see any applications they've been assigned, which they haven't been assigned any yet. If I go to groups, I can see any groups they belong to. These could be Okta groups, they could be application groups, such as groups from Office 365, and also AD groups. So in this case, I can see as part of the Finance and Operations group here. I can also go to Profile, and I can see all the details that we brought in from inside Okta. So username, first name, last name, and so forth. And if I go to the top and go to groups, I can see all the AD groups that I brought in as well. So now that I've imported my users, before I integrate with Office 365, I just want to create a couple of groups that choose who goes into Office 365. So I'm just going to create a new group here, and I'm going to call this Sales. So all users, I'm going to create this group based on users that belong into a particular OU inside Active Directory. So here, I'm also going to create a Finance and Operations group. All users that come from Finance and Operations OU. I'm going to add this group. And I'm also going to add a separate group called Support. And this is all people that have a department of support. So I'm going to click Add a Group here. Now these 3 groups, by default, I would have to manually put users into them to actually make them useful. But inside Okta, we have a rule engine. So what that rule is, you can automatically put people into groups based on particular rules. So what that means is, I'm going to click Add Rule here. I'm going to use either a basic condition here, or if I wanted to get really nitty and gritty, I could use Okta's powerful Okta expression language to populate this group based on a really advanced query. But to start off with, I'm just going to use a really basic condition. So here, I'm going to call this rule auto populate sales group. So what I'm going to do is I could use all these attributes here. Now, the one attribute that I want to use, I've actually not brought in yet. So that's one stage we need to do first. So I'm going to go to cancel here. I'm going to go to directory and profile editor. Now, to determine what OU someone comes from, I need to basically know their distinguished path. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to profile editor. This is where we can see all the profile attributes that we're bringing in from each application and how we map them between different systems. So I'm going to go to the Okta profile, and I'm going to create a new attribute. And I'm going to call this Active Directory Distinguished Name. So I'm just going to call this the same for the variable name, and this is going to be a string, and I'm going to let Okta worry about how long that particular attribute is. So I'm just going to click Save here. So now I'm going to go back to Profiles, and I'm now going to map an Active Directory attribute to that Okta attribute that I've just created, so I can then use that inside my rule engine. So I go to Mappings here. I can see here this mappings are from Okta, sorry, from the on-premise domain, so Okta demo to Okta, but also I can map data if I was writing it back to AD using this particular section here. But I'm going to go back to the first one, and I'm going to scroll down, and I've got this Active Directory DN here. And what I'm going to do to map this, I'm just going to type in appuser.dn, which basically is going to map the distinguished name, this particular attribute inside Okta. So I'm going to click Save Mappings and apply updates now. And this is an example. If I go back to people, and I'm going to let's go to Liz and view her profile, I can see I'm now bringing in this particular Active Directory distinguished name to all users inside their profile. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to copy part of this distinguished name minus the user, so I can then use this for the rule engine. So if I go back to Directory and Groups and Rules, I'm going to go back and create this auto-assign people to sales. So if the user attribute, Active Directory, oh, I clicked the wrong one, Active Directory DM contains this particular path, I'm just going to change this to sales. And then I'm just going to match it. If they have that in their Active Directory path, put them to sales. I'm just going to click Save. I'm now going to click another rule and auto assign people to finance and operations and do something similar. So what I'm going to do is if their Active Directory DM contains this, and what I'm just going to do, I'm going to go back to my Active Directory and just copy that distinguished path from there. So here we are. Oh, let's just copy that. So I now go back to here, and if their DM contains that path, put them in finance and operations. And last but not least, I'm going to create that support rule, auto assign to support, and this will just be a basic one that if the user attribute department equals support, then put them into the support group. So I'm just going to click Save, and then I'm just going to make all these rules active, so they'll then take effect inside the Okta platform. So if I go back to all, I should see that the users are now being populated into some of these groups. So I just go back here. So I can see sales, we've got some people in there, and support, we've got some people in there. So I realized, so we've got auto assign people to finance and operations. That looks good. Let's go have a look in this group. So it seems we're not actually getting people inside there. So I'm just going to have a quick look on why that is. So if we go to Emma, I'm just going to have a look on why she's not going to this group. So I can see that that has been brought in successfully. So she has got that value in there. So I'm just going to have a quick look at that rule again on why we're not going in. So let's have a quick look here. I'm just going to deactivate the rule while I have a quick look. So that rule does look good. So let's just put that in there. Let's just remake that active. There we go. I must have had a space in there, a typo. I can see this group now has all those users automatically based on the rules that I've set. So now we've got these 3 groups that we can use in Office 365. I'm not going to show you how we integrate to Office 365. So I'm going to go to Applications. So currently we have no active applications, but I'm going to add a new one. So I'm going to go to Add Application, and this is where we go to our Okta Integration Network, which is essentially our catalog of all the pre-made integrations that we have. And by the way, if you don't support it out of the box, you can just create a new application integration yourself by following the on-screen wizard. But for me, I'm going to search for Office 365. When I search for this, I can see it supports SAML and provisioning. So this is the deepest level of integration that we support of an application. So I'm going to click Add here. And it's going to ask me for a few details. So firstly, it wants to know what my Microsoft tenant name is. So I already have my Microsoft tenant up here, and I can see that my default tenant name is Okta Demo Domain. So if I go back, I'm just going to close this tab on the way here, these 2 tabs. I'm just going to put Okta Demo Domain, and then it's going to ask me what my company domain is that I want to federate. So if I go back to the Office 365 portal, and I go to Domains, I can see here that okta-demo-domain.ga is the one that I want to federate, because we only federate non-default domains inside Okta. So that means that you have one domain, normally the onmicrosoft.com domain, which is unfederated, which gives you that emergency backdoor into Office 365 if something did indeed go wrong, in the unlikely event that is. I'm just going to copy that and go back to here, copy that in here. It's going to ask me what links do I want to show on the Okta dashboard. And I want to keep things simple for my users, so I'm just going to show Outlook, the calendar, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneDrive, and also Office 365 portal. So I'm just going to untick a few things here. We could also add in how many seats that we've got if we want to help to sort of manage the number of licenses. So I'm just going to say we've got 5 seats here. I'm going to click Next. It's then going to say, how do you want users to sign on? So in Okta, we have different methods of sign on. We have what we call secure web authentication, where we essentially store static or dynamic credentials inside Okta, and we replay them into the browser using our browser plugin or a mobile app. Now, this is great in that it supports any application, but it's not great from a security or user experience perspective, and that's where SAML or WS Federation come in. What these 2 particular standards do, and Office 365 supports WS Federation, it allows you to, rather than authenticate to an application using a password, it allows Okta to authenticate you into the application, where because Okta has been configured to be a trusted provider and actually control the authentication into the application directly on behalf of Office 365 or another application. Now, normally you configure SAML or WS Federation inside the application itself, but for Office 365, it's even easier. It just needs a username and password, and it's going to do all that hard work for you. So I'm just going to copy my Office 365 service account into here and the password. And the application username format is email address. But for me, our Okta usernames are the same as email address. But just to be safe, I'm just going to set that as email address, just in case I change the Okta username format later. And I click Next. In addition, if you want to use provisioning, we can enable advanced API access, which I'm just going to do here by clicking this button here. So I'm just going to log in this account again. Just to create an OAuth token that allows me to integrate more deeply with Office 365. Just going to accept that. And now I can click Done. So now Okta is going to use the Graph API to contact Office 365 and configure WS Federation, which means we have that rich single sign-on experience into Office 365. So I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes for that to finish configuring, which it has done now. I'm just going to click Not Now in my browser to set the password. So now we've configured WS Federation, but we still have no users provisioned into the application. And that's where we can then use assignments to assign users or groups. So we could assign people manually or by a group basis. And I'm going to do it based on groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for those groups that I created before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for sales. I'm going to assign the sales team access to Office 365. Oh, I just realized I missed a step here. I didn't actually enable provisioning. So I just need to go back to the provisioning section. And this is where we finish the provisioning integration. I'm just going to click Configure Provisioning, click Enable API Integration. I've already created that OAuth token, so I don't need to re-authenticate. So I can just click Save here. And that's going to now enable provisioning to Office 365. So now that's created, I can choose what level of provisioning I want. So I'm just going to edit this, and I'm going to do a full user sync, which means we can synchronize the full profile into Office 365 rather than just basic information. And then I'm just going to click Enable Create Users, Enable Update, Enable Deactivate, and I could enable Sync Password if I wanted to. But because we're using WS Federation, passwords become irrelevant. So I'm just going to click Save here. Now, as we did before for mapping an attribute, the Active Directory distinguished name into Okta, we could also apply transformations for how we map data from or to AD or to other applications. So perhaps your username formats are different in different places. We could use that profile editor that we did before to map data in different ways. But for now, I'm just going to leave it out of the box. So I've enabled all of that down here, and I'm going to go back to assignments, and I'm going to click Assign. So I'm going to assign that group again, the sales group that I created before. And what I do when I actually click sales, it's actually going to choose when someone gets provisioned by this group mechanism, what level of licenses do you want? So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to give them a business essentials license. So I'm going to click all the different business essential licenses. And Okta, by the way, will enumerate whichever licenses you have available inside your environment. So I'm just going to go through and enable them to everything inside business essentials. I think that is it. I could also assign a particular role to this user as well. So perhaps for administrators, you want to give them a global admin or a help desk admin role. You could also map a group to a particular role as well. And these group assignments, they can be ANDed or ORed. So perhaps you want them, if they're in this group, they get a license set. They're in this group, they get a role set. So you can combine or using OR logic to sort of provide permissions into the system. So I'm just going to click Save and go back here. And then I'm just going to do the same for the finance group. Now, because the finance group need Excel on desktop, I'm going to give them a business premium license instead because they need access to Excel. So I'm just going to tick all the business premium licenses here for my finance and operations team. And click Save and go back. So now if I go to, I actually just realized I did that to the wrong one, but we'll just use it anyway. So I used the AD group rather than the one that we created before. But we'll keep going for that for now. So I go to people, we can see we've got a couple of errors for these users. I'm just going to click on this user and see what error we're getting here. So it seems there's some users already inside that platform. So this is probably because in my Office 365 environment, I didn't clean up the recycle bin. So because these users exist in the recycle bin, it's not letting me create them. But what we should see is we should see some of those users have been provisioned inside here. So we can see that Antidote has been provisioned inside there. But for these other users, they are just encountering an error because I forgot to clear my recycle bin. And we're just going to go back to the application here from that perspective. So we can see that a user has been provisioned inside that system. Now, what I can do in addition to this is I can also push groups inside Office 365. So perhaps inside Office 365, you want to bring in groups that you created inside Okta or inside AD and use them inside Office 365, perhaps a security group to control permissions in SharePoint Online or a distribution list. You can do that inside Okta as well. So what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to push some groups to Okta. So I'm going to push this sales group here. I'm also going to push the finance and operations group as well. And I've just realized I'm doing the same one again. But if I now go into groups inside Office 365, I can see that these groups are now being pushed and managed from Okta into Office 365. So to show you the process in actually creating a new user and getting them up straight away inside Okta, I'm going to create a new user in Active Directory and show you the process of logging in. So I'm just going to go back to my Okta instance here. I'm just going to sign out of Office 365. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new user inside Active Directory. Oh, my password has expired. Okay, so that's good. let's just put this here. Okay, so it's saying that password expired, and which would happen inside a demo, which means it's not going to let me in. Okay. So what I'm going to do means I can't actually create a new user there, which means we are a little bit stuck here. So what I will do is I'm going to log in with a different user instead. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to log in as Antidote to show you this process. So I'm going to log in with Antidote's email here and just put in the password. Oops. So for some reason, I'm a bit locked out of my environment here. So I can't even reset the password here. So it seems we're a little bit locked out here. So we might be stuck for the rest of the demo because I need to sort this out. But essentially what we have shown is that we can provision users into Office 365. And in addition to this, that if we create a new user in Active Directory, using our just-in-time provisioning mechanism, that user could automatically log into Okta and be in real-time provisioned with the license set that you've chosen based on the assignments into Office 365. So apologies for the few things there. So locked out, which means we can't show the last couple of points of the demo. But hopefully it's been useful to see what we can do with Okta. Now, just while we're here, we've got a little bit of time left. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you something else that we can do. So I'm just going to log into this account here, is how we set up MFA. So I just go back to admin here. What I'm going to do is enable MFA to show you how easy it is to embed MFA through the Okta platform. So I'm going to go to security and multi-factor. I'm going to enable Okta Verify. So in factor types here, we can choose what factors we enable inside our environment. So I'm going to enable Okta Verify, which is a one-time password multi-factor soft token for iOS and Android and Windows Phone, but also it supports a push notification. So I'm just going to enable this now inside of my environment, and then I can go to factor enrollment. So factor enrollment is where you can choose which users are eligible for which factors. So perhaps for certain users such as administrators, you want a more secure factor. In factor enrollment, this is where you can choose who gets what particular factors assigned to them. Now, these two sections together don't actually demonstrate where the factors are in use, and that's configured in a separate section. So if I go into security and authentication, and I go to sign-on policies, this is where I can choose where my factors are required to sign on to the Okta portal as a whole. So if I click add rule here, I'm going to say require MFA outside of the office. So in here, this is where we can then choose based on the IP address what we're doing. So this is all managed in our networks tab. And our networks tab is basically where you can create a friendly name for a particular IP address, or if we have the feature enabled in your environment based on geographical context. So I'm just going to create a new IP zone here, and I'm going to call this office location 1, and it's automatically found my IP address, but I could specify ranges and etc. in here if I wanted to. So I'm going to click save. Now, if I go in here and I want to say if the user is not in the zone and search for office location 1, I can then continue my rule. Now, for the demo purposes, it's not going to trigger because I'm in the zone. So I'm just going to reverse this to highlight it in the demo environment, where it's if we're in the zone, office location 1. And then I can choose how to authenticate, either generally to the Okta portal or via Radius. I can then choose whether the access is allowed or denied. I'm going to say access allowed, but the user needs to be prompt for a factor. Then I can choose whether that factor is per device, every time, per session, and how long that session lifetime is. I'm just going to say per device, and the session lifetime is 2 hours. So now, if I sign out of this portal, it's going to, when I sign back in this demo account, it's going to ask me to set up Okta Verify. Now, the great thing with using multi-factor through Okta, it's really simple for you to set up, and it guides them through the process. So I'm going to click Set up Okta Verify. I'm going to choose iOS. Now, I've already installed Okta Verify on my phone, so I'm just going to click Next here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a new window in my computer. I'm going to throw up my mobile phone screen here. So let me just throw my screen so you can show me, I can show the process of adding it. So hopefully that is now coming through. So let me just start my Air server. Okay. Let me just restart my Air server app. Doesn't seem to want to play ball. Not working well this demo today. Let me just kill that process and then reload. Let's just try, and there we go. So now I've got my phone up. I have Okta Verify, and now what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to make this smaller. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. Let's make this smaller. Let's put this back up. So I've got my phone, and what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to bring that browser window over here as well. So now, if I go back to my Okta Verify app down here to show you the process, I'm going to click Add Account, and now what I'm going to do, I'm going to scan the QR code on the screen, multi-factor authentication. I can see that that's been enabled. I'm inside the Okta portal. Now, the next time I logged in, because I've already enrolled, I'm using multi-factor. So that is enrolling for MFA and how quickly we can embed that for the users. Now, last but not least, with MFA, rather than embedding it on Okta as a whole, you can also do it on a per application basis. So perhaps I don't want MFA to Okta as a whole, but I want to apply it to specifically Office 365. So I come down here and search for Office 365. I'm just going to make this bigger and go to sign on. I now have these sign-on policies. So sign-on policies are like what we just created for Okta, is the sign-on policy there, but specific to Office 365. So I could click Add Rule here, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so we can read. I'm going to say no access to Office 365 for salespeople out of the office. So I could say this rule applies to this particular group, or particular group and particular set of users. So I'm going to choose this group. I could even exclude some users that belong to other groups or individual users as well. I could do it based on their location. So if they're not in the zone, again, I'm going to choose Office Location 1. We could even, inside Okta, specify the particular client. So is it a web browser, is it a desktop application, mobile device, etc. I'm just going to say any client. And then for these salespeople, I'm just going to click Deny and Save. Now, with this rule in place, any of my salespeople will be blocked from using Office 365 outside of the office. And it's as simple as that. So like I say, apologies for the few issues we had there being locked out my machine. But like I say, hopefully it's given you a good overview of the Okta platform. I'm now going to move back to the slide deck, just to our final slide, which is essentially any questions.
Thanks, James. So yeah, if you do have any questions at all, there is a questions box which is just at the right-hand side of your screen. So if you pop them there, I'll read those out shortly. So we do have one question already. This is from Andrew, who said, I presume Okta integrates seamlessly with Windows Hello?
Yes, so we can use Windows Hello to authenticate to the Okta platform or to individual applications. The only constraint that it has is because to use Windows Hello in the browser, you need to use Microsoft Edge. So as long as users are using Microsoft Edge, they can take advantage of Windows Hello as a factor.
Brilliant, thank you, James. Okay, we'll just wait a minute to see if we have any more questions come through. Okay, this next question has just come through from Mark. How does Okta authenticate Office client apps installed? Sorry, how does Okta authenticate Office clients apps installed on Windows or Mac?
Yeah, so great question. So for applications, so Office 2010 or earlier, it requires Exchange Active Sync or to connect through IMAP or POP, so the traditional mechanism. Now, the only problem is Okta does support those legacy 2010 and earlier clients. The only issue is Okta can't support MFA. So if you're under a particular rule that requires you to use multi-factor authentication, those particular clients will not work with Okta. To be able to support multi-factor authentication, you need to use Office 2013 and later. But with those particular applications, when you actually go to add your account inside Outlook, etc., or register to Excel, it'll actually prompt you to log into Okta and then prompt you for multi-factor authentication as required. And in any circumstance changes, perhaps such as your location changes, it will again prompt you for multi-factor authentication through those clients. However, like I say, for the legacy clients, if MFA is required, you just won't be able to access your email or Office 365 account through those particular platforms.
Thanks, James. Another question here says, does Okta have provisioning capabilities around Office 365?
Yep, so that's part of what we've covered today. So Office 365 is what we've done today, has full rich provisioning capabilities, be able to provision users, license and assign roles to those users, and also push groups in terms of as we've covered today.
Brilliant, thank you. And another question here says, what is the most common application integrated with Okta? Is it Office 365?
Yes, so Office 365 is the biggest application integrated inside the platform, but other big ones include such things as Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, G Suite, but Office 365 has the largest share currently inside our marketplace.
Brilliant, thank you. And Andrew, I've just seen your question there as well, and we will take that offline for you. And please do let us know on the feedback if you'd like us to set us a call, but we will be in touch regarding your question that you just submitted. So we do have another question here. What is the cost for Office 365 integration?
So the cost for Office 365 integration is something we can take offline. So we can follow up with that and sort of work out what the cost would be from that perspective. But the Okta platform in itself is priced based on users against the modules that you're interested in. So the number of users for Universal Directory, number of users for single sign-on, number of users provisioning that you want to put through the platform. And there's no other cost to it apart from that user cost there.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. If using Okta's Universal Directory to manage users, is it possible to generate reports around license provisioning?
To some basic extent, yes, you can see where licenses have been assigned in the particular applications, but I would call it a more basic visibility overview. Because we don't support licensing or role management to all applications, we can only see basic what licenses have been assigned, where that integration support of it. We normally suggest that most people go for a separate asset management type tool or software metering tool if that's of critical importance to the business to get that richer overview inside those applications.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think that's all the questions we have today. So thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day to join us for the webinar. I hope you found it useful, and thank you, James, for presenting as well. As mentioned at the beginning, we have recorded the webinar today, so I'll send you all a link to the recording most probably this afternoon. And there are a couple of questions at the end, so if you would provide us with any feedback, or if you'd like any further information, just pop that in there and we will be in touch. Okay, thanks and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.